To me, this is all about optics, and it doesn't do anything tangibly.
I think that you have a fair statement in saying that it is optical and symbolic. I think that it is a symbolic change. I think that tearing down statues really makes us question how we plan to commemorate history moving forward, right? I heard a lot from the opposition or the other side that tearing down a statue, not us, we didn't tear down the statue, but tearing down the statue or changing the name would be erasing history. And I know that that's a common thread of discourse, but we're actually creating history as well. I want to remind people that
You're creating history by eliminating history.
And that's how history moves. It's a fluid thing and things change. And how we collectively decide to move forward is a decision that we should make for the benefit of Indigenous people.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Toronto. Well, folks, I'm back at my old alma mater, Ryerson University, or what used to be known as Ryerson University, wearing my old Ryerson Polytechnical Institute journalism jacket. That's what it was called back in the early 80s when I went there. Still fits, but I think buttoning up, well, that's a bridge too far. But the reason I'm here is I'm standing where the former statue of Egerton Ryerson once stood a couple of months ago. That was torn down by a bunch of cancel culture thugs. And now comes word that the Ryerson University's board of directors voted unanimously to change the name of this institution because of Egerton Ryerson's alleged links to the residential school system. And of course, the media party has just been cheering this on. My favorite is a CBC story. It quotes Sam Howden, who is a Red River Métis, and he began referring to Ryerson as ex-university, and that caught on in progressive circles, of course. The article goes on to say that Mr. Howden refers to himself using the they, them pronouns. I guess it's more virtue signaling to show how much of a social justice warrior they are. But the thing is, folks, this is sad because I think, as do many others, that Egerton Ryerson is getting a bum rap. And if you don't trust me, please reach out to the recent issue of the Dorchester Review. It has a fantastic article called The Imbecile Attack on Egerton Ryerson, subtitled An Assault on Decency. And the article points out that Dr. Egerton Ryerson was one of the most influential figures in the history of Upper Canada and was in his day considered the very paragon of the forward-looking, progressive, inclusive, worldly intellectual. He was a beacon of educational reform, a fighter against injustice of all sorts, and a kind and generous man. A Methodist minister, he pushed for religious equality and has long been celebrated as the founder of Ontario's public school system. It should be noted, however, that Ryerson University's Aboriginal Education Council issued a paper back in 2010 declaring that Dr. Ryerson had played a defining role in establishing residential schools. The document contained misspelt names and statements that were not backed up by references. Based on limited research, it included material from a discredited, defrocked United Church minister and was not subject to peer review, nor was it circulated outside a small circle of administrators. Nevertheless, this caught on that Dr. Ryerson was indeed the architect of the residential schools, even though he had died 2 years before the residential school system was established. So again, we see cancel culture playing out in a so-called school of higher learning. It's tragic on so many fronts. First of all, they're going after the wrong guy when it comes to the residential school system. Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father, he was the last prime minister to sign off on that. I don't see those statues being torn down, nor do I want them to be torn down. But this is the way it is. Now, back when I went to university, you were taught how to think. These days, you are taught what to think. And if you don't think that certain approved way, there will be consequences when it comes to dealing with the cancel culture mob. And to paraphrase Tina Turner, what does truth have to do with it? Hey, how are you doing there?
How are you?
Very good.
I was
Good.
just listening into some of your broadcasts.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually one of the members of Reconciliation X University.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
Yeah.
then. So what do you think about this, ma'am?
I think that it was a monumental celebratory moment for our organization.
Oh, okay.
Because we have been working for years and actually decades. The Indigenous faculty and staff have been bringing this forward. As of 2017, the university actually made an unofficial decision to change the name when the Colonialism 150 campaign was being run by the RSU at the time.
Okay.
So really, it's actually about the university coming to terms with that and the university coming to terms with accepting that and moving forward. So it's a little bit less about what I think and what our organization thinks, and a little bit more about kind of, if you're going to make these promises, then follow through with your promises.
In a tangible sense, what does this do? We have dozens of reserves right now that have a boiled water advisory. They don't have clean drinking water. Canada is allegedly a first world nation. We have the biggest reserves of fresh water in the world.
Absolutely.
How the idea that this exists on the reserves is egregious, but how does tearing down a statue and changing a name bring about any tangible change to the day-to-day lives of those natives that live on such reserves?
I hear you, and that's a fair question. I think that the fact that we cannot provide fresh water to the peoples who've lived on this land for forever, or since time immemorial, there's people have different trains of thought on that, but I think that is appalling. I think that is absolutely problematic, and I think that people are fighting to make those changes every day. I think this was an opportunity for the institution to set a precedent, downtown Toronto especially, for other places around and other institutions around the country to follow suit, yeah.
Okay.
And really take a critical look at what reconciliation looks like within the walls of those institutions. So although it does not help reserves with fresh water, we do as an organization, we set up the memorial site for people in the city to have an opportunity to come and grieve, because a lot of the time this was the first time people were hearing about it. And people need a space to come and give atonements and things like that.
I'm just of the opinion that, in the months to come, the city is going to be renaming Dundas Street because of the alleged links to slavery that Dundas had. Yeah. The city's cost alone is going to be $6 million to change all the signage. Yeah. That's not to mention what it's going to cost private businesses to change all their stationery. What I'm saying, I'd rather see all those millions of dollars going into, like I said before, establishing clean water on reserves rather than just doing a name change. To me, this is all about optics, and it doesn't do anything tangibly.
I think that you have a fair statement in saying that it is optical and symbolic. I think that it is a symbolic change. I think that tearing down statues really makes us question how we plan to commemorate history moving forward, right? I heard a lot from the opposition or the other side that tearing down a statue, not us, we didn't tear down the statue, but tearing down the statue or changing the name would be erasing history. And I know that that's a common thread of discourse, but we're actually creating history as well. I want to remind people that
You're creating history by eliminating history.
And that's how history moves. It's a fluid thing, and things change. And how we collectively decide to move forward is a decision that we should make for the benefit of Indigenous people.
Where do we draw the line? Right now it's Sir John A. Macdonald. Who's next?
I think that what you're saying is fair. I think that what you're saying, I understand where it's coming from. I think that people are multifaceted. I think that nobody's perfect. And the way that we celebrate certain people throughout history in, monuments and things like that is actually a little bit problematic and a little bit authoritative, right? It takes up a lot of space, This area feels a little bit more calm actually now.
Really? Was it that triggering to you when Dr. Egerton Ryerson's statue was here, ma'am?
I think that it was very upsetting and it had a weight to it. I think it was heavy. I think that people were frustrated with having to come here and work in a capacity in which they were working in spite of the things that Egerton Ryerson did.
One last question, I guess. Since Ryerson University is pretty much now defunct, what should it be called?
See, that everybody's been asking that. I don't have an opinion on it. I don't think it should be named after another person. I think that everyone should have an opportunity to come together and decide moving forward on a name that reflects values of the institution in the future.
Hey folks, the federal election is off and running. Do you trust the mainstream media to deliver you the straight goods? I sure don't. If so, please go to realreporters.ca. That's realreporters.ca. And if you can, kindly make a donation so that Rebel News can bring you the other side of the story. Karl Marx University, how does that grab you?
It's not doing it for me. Again,
Thank you.
I don't know. Naming it after a person is not for me.